Okay, thank you, Chair and members. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. As the Chair said, just a little review about your part in the bigger process of the MPO. A couple of years ago, we did a sort of a CAC improvement effort. We talked to a lot of members and asked, how can we make this experience better for you? One of the things that we heard a lot of was, we come to these meetings every month and we talk, and I don't see how we fit into the bigger picture. So this is the bigger picture for you, so that you can kind of see your role. I'm hoping this will be more of a dialogue. So if you have any questions or anything, shout out and we'll talk about it. I don't have many slides, so if there's no questions, we're going to get out here really quick. So ask. Okay. So what is the CAC? It's public input for the transportation planning process. The OahuMPO is a federally required transportation planning agency for the region, and in our case, the region is the island of Oahu. If you go to Denver, anybody's ever been to Denver, Dr. Cog, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, is the regional transportation planning agency for Denver, and they cover multiple cities and multiple counties. There are by-state MPOs. My old stomping grounds, Fargo-Moorhead, covers 2 counties in 2 different states. And in many cases, MPO is the only agency that can transcend those political boundaries, right? So if you think about a major city like Denver, transportation is not just a Denver problem, it's a problem for everybody. And so the MPO provides that avenue for everyone to work on it at a regional level, because they can deal with all of the cities and all of the counties and so forth. The CAC is actually created by comprehensive agreement, so the governor and the city and county and the chair of the MPO policy committee at the time all signed this agreement. I've got a copy if you really want to see it, and I think it's on our website. In fact, go on the website. That sort of talks about how the MPO is supposed to operate, who is a member of the policy committee, and it also specifies that there shall be a citizen advisory committee, so that's why you all are here. You're advisors to the policy committee, and the CAC must include non-government organizations representing a broad spectrum of the population, but specifically called out in the comprehensive agreement is representing those traditionally underserved by transportation systems. So we make a special effort to include those folks in this process. But in general, what we try to really get is a broad representation of a lot of perspectives into the process, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. You are not a member. Your organization is the member. And they can appoint whoever they want to represent them to come here and represent that organization. But individuals are not members, only organizations. Yeah? Any questions so far? Good. Who watches Game of Thrones? Attaboy. So, CAC is the hand of the king, just like Peter Dinklage here is. So, this is the organization of the MPO. Here's the policy committee. They're the king. They make all the decisions. Here's me below them, catching things as they fall. Citizen Advisory Committee is the right hand, right? And you advise the king on what you think he should do. The left hand is the Technical Advisory Committee, and that's made up of planners and engineers from our member agencies. There's 2 from DPP, there's 2 from DTS, there's 2 from Highways, and there's 2 from STP. And we're also trying to get HART on there, because HART is on the policy committee now. Dan Grabowska serves there, so we're trying to get membership on the TAC for them as well. So, you serve as advisors. Sometimes the policy committee can hear you and say, thank you for your advice, we're going to do something else. And that's just the nature of the beast. All you can do is advise them. So the way I think about it is, if I was going through my pants pocket and I found $100, right? And I thought, there's $100, I could spend this any number of ways. So I go to Marion and I say, Marion, I got $100, what do you think? How should I spend it? Marion's going to give me her opinion. I can go to Mike. Mike, I got this $100. What do you think I should do with it? He's going to say, give it to me. I'm like, all right, thanks. Thanks for that advice. Chad, what do you think? Chad's going to say, buy a bike, right? So I collect all these all this advice, but ultimately the decision's mine, right, on that $100. Ultimately, the decision is the policy committee's. Even if they don't take your advice, it doesn't mean it wasn't important in the process. It may have helped them come to some conclusion. And of course, if they do take your advice, everyone is, yay, they did it. And that's okay. But I just want to emphasize that point. You're the advisor to the policy committee and the decisions that they make. So, the purpose and need. Together, we're smarter than any individual among us. We hope so, anyway. Multiple perspectives leads to better decisions. So you may ask, why do I have this graphic here that houses all these smart individuals in a stupid group? Let me explain. There actually is research out there that a group that works based on a consensus, trying to achieve consensus, will actually arrive at decisions that are not as good as if each of them had acted on their own, right? But the more perspectives that get added to the decision-making process, the better the decision tends to be. And so I'm saying this for this reason. I guess I don't want anybody to come to these meetings feeling like, well, this is what I really think is important. These 2 or 3 things are what I really think is important, but I'll just go along with the group, right? That leads to bad decisions. So part of your charge, part of your job here on the CAC is to stand up for what you believe in. It may seem obvious, but I hear a lot from people who talk to me after the meetings and say, well, I really thought this, but everyone kind of seemed to be saying this, and so I didn't say anything. That's exactly what we don't want. So by all means, stand up for what you believe in, talk about what's important to you, and we may never get consensus, and that's okay. That's part of the process. It's a democratic process. It's supposed to be a democratic process. So that's okay. So I think enough on that. Informed consent. The idea here is that if the government comes to you and says, we're going to build a highway through your neighborhood, and they inform you and give you an opportunity to comment, give your feedback, yes, I like it, no, I don't like it, I like it only if you make these changes, that essentially they're getting from you sort of an informed consent to go forward with that project. So part of your role in the bigger process is providing that feedback, providing that input to, again, the policy committee. So the way I think of it is this. We take let's say the long-range transportation plan to the policy committee. The technical advisory committee will review that and make a technical recommendation. Yes, we think these projects are needed. We think the costs are reasonable. Yes, we recommend approval of the long-range transportation plan. But the citizen advisory committee gives them some sense of how acceptable the plan is to the public, right? So yes, it's technically feasible. Yes, the public thinks it's a good idea, and that helps inform then the decision-making process. They have some comfort that it's a good plan, essentially, right? We do have a federal requirement at the MPO to provide reasonable opportunity to comment on the long-range plan and the TIP and the OWP. Now, not every MPO has a CAC like this. In fact, very few do. When you talk, or when I talk to other MPOs, most MPOs will say that, yeah, we tried to have a standing CAC, but people they didn't seem to care. They just stopped showing up. And so they'll do CACs on a project-by-project basis. So every corridor study has its own CAC. Every long-range plan has its own CAC. And once the plan's done, they go away. This is really one of the few MPOs that has this kind of group that comes together regularly, and there's I don't know how many are here, 25, 30 people here. So there's a certain amount of energy. You must want to be here on some level, right? To come here and talk about these issues. And we're really one of the few MPOs that has that. And I see it really as an asset that we have that many MPOs really don't have. We can argue about what is reasonable. That's debatable. But I guess my pledge to you is that every chance that we get, we want to provide you the opportunity to look at things and discuss them and provide feedback into the process. We do have a participation plan also on our website that defines kind of the minimum effort that we are going to do to provide that reasonable opportunity to comment and be involved in the decision-making process. And actually, we're updating that if we ever get our funding this year. We're supposed to be updating that, so we may be coming back to you later this year with opportunities to influence that plan itself. Yeah. So why do we do all of this? What's the point? Well, in the past, we've made mistakes. And I mean the royalty, not just me, not just the MPO. So this is a picture from Oakland, California. This is the Cypress Freeway. And so basically, back in the 50s and 60s, President Eisenhower said, you know, I just came back from Germany. They got this thing called the Autobahn. I think we need one of those here. And so we started building the interstate highway system. And suddenly the federal government was giving out huge grants to states to build and operate this thing. And so state DOTs, not to pick on them, but this is history, state DOTs sort of got in the habit of showing up in your neighborhood saying, congratulations, you're getting an interstate right through the middle of your neighborhood. We're going to buy out all these houses and tear them down, sorry. They usually were in the poorest neighborhoods because land was cheaper there than in the wealthy neighborhoods. And of course, the people that still lived here, how many people want to live next to H1? Raise your hand. Anybody? Okay. So the people that lived here, they didn't feel like they really were benefited at all. And it really sort of divided the neighborhood. And so after a while, people got really angry. And they started asking, how come we don't have a voice in the process? How come you don't come to us first and ask us where should we build the interstate, instead of just saying, you know, looking at a map and drawing a line and saying, we're going to build the interstate right there. Sorry about all those people who happen to live there. So the federal government heard that. And they said, you know what? Our reputation's on the line too, because they're spending our dollars. So we need to establish a process by which the public has some input into the decision-making process. And that's really when MPOs were established. 1972 was the first transportation bill that said any urban area more than 50,000 people has to have an MPO in order to spend federal transportation dollars. And you know, if you talk to the folks at the DOT, they'll say, we were planning. Well, they were planning in terms of moving as many cars as fast as possible, not in terms of improving lives, though at the time they probably equated those two things, right? The more cars we move, the faster, that means people's lives are better. But today we don't really have that same sensibility. So that's why we have the federal requirement. Our participation plan, again, identifies the minimum procedures and guidelines to involve communities, groups, and individuals in Oahu MPO plans and projects. If the city and county is doing a project, if the state is doing a project, they do not have to follow our process. That's important. So this applies only to the MPO. They have their own processes that they're supposed to be following, and the federal requirement stays. That's still there. But the participation plan applies only to us. And as I said, it is scheduled for a full update this year, and it is online. Anybody, if you have a photographic memory, you can probably remember that. Otherwise, see me afterwards. So how do you operate? Prospective members, some of you may know this, or maybe you don't. Maybe it's been too long. Prospective members have to attend at least 4 meetings to apply. Again, the PC makes the final decision. You can recommend approval to the policy committee. Policy committee actually is the only decision-making body. Current members have to attend at least half the meetings per year in order to maintain their membership. And we send out quite a few sort of warning letters this year, yeah? So, chair and vice chair get elected annually, and we just did that at the last meeting. The chair sets the agenda. So if you want something on the agenda, I'll give you Mike's personal cell phone number, and call him. He conducts the meetings by Robert's rules, or as close as we can get. None of us are experts in Robert's rules, I'm sure. And then transmits the CAC views to the policy committee. So at every policy committee meeting, there's an agenda item that says CAC highlights. And the chair then provides the policy committee with kind of what the CAC has been doing. So if there's anything you want communicated, you want to be sure that the policy committee gets this message, you can talk to Mike, and Mike at the policy committee has the opportunity to explain to the policy committee, this is why we think this way, or some members feel this way, or whatever. The vice chair is sort of like the vice president. He doesn't do much, except he provides in the absence of the chair. No reflection on our current vice chair. MPO staff are not members. I'm not a member of this committee. Marion's not a member. We work for you. We're here to support you so that this process can occur. And we basically are the keepers of the participation plan and the rules of procedure that the CAC has, the bylaws, so we try to make sure you don't violate your own bylaws. But that's kind of the limit of what we do. And of course we document all of this so that we can get credit for it. Yay. Our products, we have three main products. The OWP, I'm sure you're all familiar with. Every year I come to you and I say, it's time to talk about projects for the OWP. These are planning studies. It's also basically our budget for the agency. And we do that annually, even though it's I'm sorry, this is outdated. It's a 2-year time horizon now, but we update it annually, so it's a rolling 2-year document. The long-range transportation plan is the heart of everything. It's a 25-year time horizon. This sets the future goals, the strategies, the projects, the vision, the big picture of what we want transportation to be in the future. Any project that's in the long-range transportation plan is eligible for federal funds. If it's not in the plan, it's not eligible, and that's important. So if you want, whatever, you want to widen H2, it's not in the plan, it's not eligible for federal funds. So it's probably not going to happen. It also, I think the value of this is it's essentially our policy document. So the policy committee has approved the long-range transportation plan. There's lots of language in there about complete streets and multimodalism and lots of things like that. Freight movement and quality of life and livability and sustainability. And we take that seriously. And that's part of, as we go about our job, we want to help try to achieve that vision. And this is updated every 5 years, so the next one is due April of 2016. And in fact, I think Randolph is trying to pull together the ORTP working group right now. So if you're interested in serving on that, let Marion or I know. And then the TIP. The TIP is a 4-year schedule that implements projects from the long-range plan. So in the long-range plan, you may have a list of 80, it's a 25-year time horizon, right? So you may have 80 projects in the long-range plan. We can't possibly build 80 projects. Every year, we may have funding for a couple. And so the question is, well, what comes first? So the TIP takes the projects from the long-range plan and says, in year 1, we're going to do project 4 and project 26. And in year 2, we're going to do project 40 and project 37. And it schedules those projects for implementation. So, and it's updated every 3 to 4 years. But the ORTP is sort of the center of everything, and everything, all these other things sort of float around that. So the TIP obviously comes right out of the ORTP. The purpose of the OWP is really to support the development of the ORTP. Did I say that right? The purpose of the OWP is to support the ORTP. So, as an example, in the long-range transportation plan, I was just telling the chair before the meeting, In the current OWP, we have something called the Central Oahu Transportation Study. Why? Well, because when we were trying to get the last ORTP approved, the chair of the policy committee at the time said, wait a minute, in the last plan there was something called the Central Malco Road, and you don't have it in there now, how come? And I said, well, honestly, it's because we have no idea if it's useful. We don't know what the benefit is, we don't know what the costs are, we don't know what the environmental impacts are, we don't know if it's even feasible technically. So why would we plan for it if we don't know if it's possible? I said, I think what we should do is a planning study. And she said, good idea, and the policy committee passed, at that point, voted and said, Brian, you need to put in a future OWP, a planning study for Central Oahu. And that's where it came from. So the purpose of the OWP really is to support the development of this long-range transportation plan. So, the summary. What a motley looking group of people, that guy especially. Advisory body to me and to the policy committee. You're the foundation of our federally required public input. We talk to you guys more than we talk to anybody else. And we appreciate that. You're helping us. The more different perspectives we can bring into the process, the more understanding we can have about why is this project important, what are the potential impacts that helps make what we do, we hope, a better product in the end. And it is a two-way street. So as you are giving us information, we're giving you information that hopefully you're carrying back to your neighborhood boards or to the organizations that you represent and informing them about what's going on as well. We expect that and we certainly hope that's happening. And we're here to support you so that ultimately better decisions can get made. This is an old photo, isn't it? There's Marilyn. There's Tom. Woo. Ooh. Okay, so that's the summary. Are there any questions?
For other MPOs that don't have groups like neighborhood boards, I think we're the only metropolitan area that has that kind of smallish thing. What makes up the organizations that are in the MPO? Little towns or counties or?
So for in my experience, when we needed a citizen advisory group, if it were, let's say, a corridor study, so we're in downtown and we're thinking about widening Queen or whatever. Yeah. We basically kind of put the word out, and interested folks who want to take part would show up. Now, they wouldn't necessarily represent an organization. Yeah. They could be individuals. The organization thing is just something that we do. So basically, you get the folks who are sort of have their ear to the ground and have some level of understanding, or are a major stakeholder, like a property owner, who says, I don't want you to take my property, right? So they would show up and they would sit on the Citizen Advisory Committee to make sure that their voice is heard in the process.
For that project?
For that project.
But now, other MPOs that don't have things like we have one government, city and county. That's unusual. Mm-hmm. And we don't have any sub-governments, on Oahu.
Right.
So I guess these other guys have, like Denver, must have lots of little towns and boroughs and whatever. So they're the organizations that are represented. Is that accurate?
Well, again, it's kind of up to the individual MPO, and it may vary by project. So if Dr. Cog is doing their regional long-range transportation plan, and they want a CAC, they may just put out an area-wide call and say, we're looking for people. And if you happen to show up,
I see. Okay.
I say, good job, you could be on the CAC. Yeah, and it could be individual, or if they want to, it's up to them. They could go with organizations. I'll let the chair call it.
Back there. Two separate short questions. First is, what's the track record for groups applying and either making it or not making the cut? And secondly, what, if any, rail projects are in the 25-year plan you described?
Rail projects?
Rail project.
Well, the rail project is in the
extension.
So we have in the long-range plan what's called the illustrative list. Now, the illustrative list really isn't in the plan, but what it's meant to be is sort of the on-deck circle, right? So if somehow money fell out of the sky, what would we do next? Well, we'd go to that illustrative list, right? So in the illustrative list, we do have an extension to UH, and we have Waikiki. And is there one at the
And
Eva
to,
end?
West
to
Kapolei.
west, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to Kapolei. So those are on the illustrative list. Have any organizations ever been not approved by the policy committee?
No.
Not that I know of. So good track record.
One of the things you might mention is that they have their own statute and under state law, even though it's federally mandated, and they don't have to follow the Sunshine Law. For instance, remember we had a big debate about what's a quorum for this group that could be 100 people in this group. If more came, it met the requirements. And we finally came up with a third rather than a half and that sort of thing as our quorum, given the number of members that we had officially registered. That's outside the Sunshine Law. The other thing is that on the policy committee, you've got 5 city council members. Well, that violates the Sunshine Law. That's more than half. But that's in the state law that sets them up. So there's some anomalies in there because they have their own statute under state law that basically supersedes this, much of the Sunshine Law. And basically we follow Robert's rules here rather than the Sunshine Law. Now meetings are open and they're public and we vote and do all the same kinds of things, so it's not a big deal. But it's not under the Sunshine Law.
Actually, 2 if I may. First one is, has there been any consideration for a direct relationship between the TAC and the CAC? Because right now we go through the staff.
Right.
And it seems to me that